focusing on for this upcoming lesson? So what are the standards that you're covering with your kids?
Okay, so looking at my TEKS, we're going to be doing 3.4K, which is solving 1 and 2 step multiplication division problems within 100, and then 3.5B, representing and solving 1 to 2 step multiplication division problems with 100 using arrays, strip diagrams, and equations.
Okay, so what do we have, like what's the end goal here as far as the assessment piece that we're going to be using to collect data on the students for measuring
Our
their success?
district common assessment 2, which is multiplication and division with tables.
Okay. All right, so then as far as the lesson goes between now and then, what are we doing to make sure that we're giving the kids the time to practice? What do you think that the exemplar should look like? Like when the kids sit down and take this, what is your expectation for like them solving the multiplication and division?
Like when I'm talking about like problem solving.
Mm-hmm. So like, do you have an example of one that would be where you have a multiplication and a division?
Yes.
Okay.
So this one.
Okay.
So we've been using strategies like using get, so groups times each equals total, and looking and seeing what we know inside the story problem and filling in that in to see if they need to multiply or divide, and then using their hashtag to divide or skip counting to multiply.
Okay. So your expectation then for them doing a division problem would be what? Like,
I expect them to write the correct equation with the
Okay.
total in front, and then use a hashtag to skip count their multiples. The way they have their answer is when they count their multiples to find their quotient. And if they struggle with counting on their hashtag to count their multiples, they can use support dots. So if they're counting by 4, they
Okay.
need 4 support dots to help them count on.
okay. And then, so that's for the division. So when they're doing a multiplication problem, your expectation would be, and I know we have like a range here for kids.
Yeah.
So we have kids that might be on different strategies. So what would that be?
So if it's a 1-by-1 multiplication, I expect them to do equal groups or doing their skip count lines.
Okay.
It's similar to a hashtag, but it needs to just be slightly different for them so they don't get them confused.
Okay.
If they're doing a 2-by-1, the expectation is that they're using an area model to multiply the 1-digit factor by the 2-digit factor, relating it to when we found area
Okay.
earlier in our multiplication unit.
Okay. So this isn't the first time you're doing this because you have done multiplication and division like separate in the
Yes.
class. You've exposed them to both. But at this point, you're putting them together and kind of increasing the rigor by doing the story problems because that is the expectation for the district common assessment. What will you, or what would you say, have your kids already had success on when just doing in isolation the multiplication and the division?
Within a story problem? They know they know the appropriate numbers to use. So in years past, kids have not used all the numbers within the story problem, and this year my kids they know what numbers to use. They know how to write get, but they struggle with how to fill it out correctly, like putting groups in each and all that.
Right.
But they are attacking problems. They're not just waiting for me to come and offer support or to prompt them. They're getting started with something. It might not always be the right thing, but they're starting right away.
Sure. So you can use, in either situation, you could use the formula GET, which is your groups
Times each equals total.
equals your total. Okay, so what do you think? In isolation, the kids have been successful with this. When they're just given the multiplication, when they're just given division. What do you think, looking at the common assessment and the interim assessments that you've created, what do you think are going to be the biggest misconceptions when the kids have to choose between the correct operation?
I honestly think that they are going to see 2 numbers together and automatically want to multiply them without even looking at their get. Like they'll fill it out, but they might not fill out the get correctly. So if it's division and they have 70 total, and then they're stacking it into 6 equal groups or whatever, they want to put 70 under the groups and 6 under each and multiply that together instead of really looking at the action of the problem.
Okay, so you would say they're probably just going to jump straight to the multiplication part. Do you think that's because they're more comfortable with it?
I think, yeah, and I think that they think area model is cool, so they
Okay.
just like to go, area model!
Do it. Okay. So you've created some things, some activities to kind of hit these misconceptions with your kids. What part of the modeling that you're going to be doing with your kids, like what's the vocabulary that you're going to be using when doing this to make sure that it's transferred when they go out to do their independent practice?
We've been doing a lot of gradual release. So
Okay.
I do, you watch, I do, we do together, you do, I watch. And so the vocabulary we've been using is groups and how many each. I've been also showing them how to use strip diagrams and how to draw models to help them visualize what's happening.
Okay. So if you're modeling this, like this is your I do part for the kids. So the kids are listening and maybe taking notes at this point. You've taken the numbers out of the story problem. So what exactly would you have them focus on? Because this part needs to be like extremely scripted when you're doing it for the kids, because it's almost like a rubric that you would have when you go out to make sure that the kids are hitting those points as well. So when you're doing this actual problem, like let's just take this first one, like what would you stop and focus on for the kids in that I do part that you're modeling, like specifically that you want them to transfer?
The rows, because we've talked about when we do area,
Okay.
that we have rows times columns or length times width. And so relating that back to finding area and plugging that into our model.
So like if you, obviously with the numbers being taken out,
Yeah.
you're not focusing on the actual fluency or computation piece
Right.
of this. So what would be like the vocabulary that you're wanting the kids to pull out from this problem? Like the action that's happening, because you talked earlier about like the kids not understanding it's multiplication or division based on what the actions in the problem. So in this sense, is this where you would set up like your G times E equals T and have them like check
Yeah.
like I have this, or is it more of
Yeah, so,
looking at the question saying I don't have a total? Because that's kind of what you mentioned earlier was with get, it focuses on a total or not.
yeah. So when we did this, so it says Matt is planting veggies in his garden. He plants blank rows. Each row has blank veggies in it. How many veggies did Matt plant? So I would put my G times E equals T, and then he plants blank rows. Well, drawing our area model,
Okay.
that would be your group. So
Right.
under that G, we put like a little box or something. That's something we're going to know that when we get our numbers in.
Okay.
And then each row has blank veggies in it. That's going to be our columns, relating that back to area.
Okay.
And so, yeah, the question, how many veggies did Matt plant? That's our action.
And at this
Putting a
point,
question mark under that total because we don't know the
right, we're missing the total at that point. So that would be the multiplication part. When you have the division, what vocabulary are you going to be focused on here? Again, it's the same thing where you pulled out the numbers.
Yep.
So we're not focusing on the computation piece, but more of what operation are we choosing?
So the question for
I need Braden to the office for early dismissal.
Keep going, sorry.
the question for this one says, what is the number of grapes each boy ate? So for this one, when they fill out, when they just write G times E equals T, we'll go to that question and say, well, the question says, how much did they each eat? So that's what we don't know, that we're going to put a question mark under each. And we've learned that when we have story problems, if we know the total, we're going to need to divide. So if the each is missing, we have to divide. If the G is missing, we have to divide. And if the total's in the problem, if the total's not in the problem, they have to multiply.
Okay.
So that's just their easy way of figuring out if they have to multiply or divide.
Perfect. All right, so this is your modeling piece that you're doing. So after this, what are your expectations for giving the kids the independent time to practice? Because it needs to be between 10 and 15 minutes before